So it is the last Mark Dolan tonight until September. I'm going to miss you massively over August. We've got a lot to get through over the next 2 hours. And tonight, it is big opinion, it's big debate, and you know something? Entertainment as well, because it's been a hard old year, hasn't it? And we could do with a smile. So lots to get through. Your perfect mix on a Sunday night. Let's start with your perfect newsreader. Who could that be? Ray Addison? Some of the others? No. Tatiana Sanchez.
Mark, thank you very much and good evening. The top stories this hour. A fourth man has been charged with committing violent disorder in Liverpool city centre yesterday. The Prime Minister earlier vowed rioters would regret taking part in what he called far-right thuggery after a fifth day of violence in England, as the government also announced emergency security for mosques amid the threat of further disorder. It comes as anti-immigration demonstrators attacked police officers and smashed the windows of a hotel in Rotherham. South Yorkshire Police has said one person has been arrested on suspicion of public order offences there. They say 10 officers were injured. Police have warned further violence was likely following protests in England and in Northern Ireland. Over 100 people were arrested yesterday. It comes after 3 little girls were killed in a knife attack at a dance club in Southport almost a week ago. Sir Keir Starmer says those causing violent trouble will face convictions.
I won't shy away from calling it what it is, far-right thuggery. To those who feel targeted because of the colour of your skin or your faith, I know how frightening this must be. I want you to know that this violent mob do not represent our country, and we will bring them to justice.
9 people have been arrested in Middlesbrough as cars were set alight and missiles thrown at police. Large scuffles have broken out between police and anti-immigration protesters there today. The unrest spread during a protest which started at the town's cenotaph this afternoon. Groups pushed burning wheelie bins at a line of police officers and a car was set alight on Parliament Road. The police service in Northern Ireland says those involved in violence which erupted following anti-immigration protests in Belfast will be dealt with using the full force of the law. It's after a supermarket owner in Belfast says his business has been reduced to ashes after it was targeted during the disorder. Northern Ireland's First Minister Michelle O'Neill says those involved in violence on the streets of Belfast should be quickly brought before the courts. This morning, a clean-up operation was underway in the Donegal Road area following last night's unrest. Now, away from the protests, Prince Harry and his wife Meghan Markle have been discussing online safety with broadcasters in the United States.
I think one of the scariest things that we've learned over the course of the last 15, 17 years that social media's been around, and more so recently, is the fact that it could happen to absolutely anybody. I mean, we always talk about, in the olden days, if your kids were under your roof, you knew what they were up to. At least they were safe, right? And now they can be in the next door room on a tablet or on a phone and can be going down these rabbit holes. And before you know it, within 24 hours, they could be taking their life.
And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. And now it is back to one of my favourite presenters, Mark Dolan.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening. What is this job? What am I here to do? Well, it's pretty simple for me, really. I'm looking for the truth. In media, that's the only currency of any real value. And the pursuit of the truth doesn't go in straight lines. Sometimes you take 1 step forward and 2 back. But we now inhabit a world where the truth will get you cancelled, and where narratives and ideology have replaced reality. For example, women now. Disagree with that? Shut up, bigot. We live in a world where the truth is twisted and warped to fulfill a political agenda. For example, the demonisation of the West and the characterisation of this country as some kind of evil, post-colonial regime, even though, in spite of this week's troubles, we boast arguably the most successful, diverse society on earth. But even poor old Winston Churchill gets a kicking in the papers today. A council in Hertfordshire has decided that a portrait of our greatest ever Briton will hang alongside a lengthy and apologetic explanation of his links to racism, slavery and colonialism. Now, this is the man who defeated the greatest racist in history, Adolf Hitler. But now he's the bad guy. Make it make sense. As the son of Irish immigrants myself, I won't apologise for this country. In fact, I will invite the world to thank us for everything. The rule of law, parliamentary democracy, free markets, the Industrial Revolution, the Commonwealth, a historic legacy of investment in some of the poorest and most deprived nations on earth. We can be thanked for Shakespeare, the Beatles, J.K. Rowling, and yes, my favourite, Sir Elton John. You can thank us for international diplomacy, entrepreneurialism, creativity and art, and the small matter of our expensive and bloody efforts to end slavery. And do you know something? You can thank us for Brexit too, which was one in the eye to the grim dystopian project of globalism. But this week, our country has been torn apart by civil disorder, which I condemn unreservedly. How dare violent racist thugs attack our cops and wreak havoc in Southport with an absurd assault on a mosque whilst a community mourns. But to move forward, we need a frank national conversation and we need the truth. So, from my analysis, what appears to have happened in the aftermath of the horrific murder of 3 little girls in Southport is a mixture of far-right fascists who simply hate foreigners and want to return to the 1950s, messaging each other to meet up on Telegram, possibly fueled by Russian disinformation and lies on social media. But you also have decent, ordinary people of all races, backgrounds and religions simply unhappy with a dangerously open borders policy, which is changing the country before their very eyes. Which takes me to Sir Keir Starmer's speech in the aftermath of the riots, predictably taking the path of least resistance by focusing his response on the far right, as though that were the only issue at play here. I would expect nothing less from a man I have always considered to be a shallow, preening opportunist. This is a man who takes the knee to the latest woke cause, and is so predictable in his vacuous, empty pronouncements. He may actually be our first AI Prime Minister, a human manifestation of ChatGPT software gone wrong. We got a soundbite, didn't we? And a pink light show at number 10, which changes nothing, and a partisan blame game, which made anyone concerned about eye-watering levels of legal and illegal immigration feel like they'd been labelled far-right. From a man who rails against the forces of division, his statement itself was divisive and noticeably lacking in nuance, creating anger among normal folk worried about the arrival on our shores on a daily basis of people whose backgrounds we do not know. People trying to fathom the economic and social cost of accommodating these people in our previously stable society. Is it far right to be concerned about the impact of 700,000 people a year legally entering the country on social cohesion, not to mention the impact on our creaking infrastructure, housing availability, the welfare bill and the NHS? In politics, the greatest weapon is mockery, and thousands of normal people have been mocking Starmer for this far-right label. For example, this hilarious tweet from political commentator Amy Gallagher, posing at a garden window, reading an intellectual book, and the tweet reads, "According to Keir Starmer, apparently I'm a far-right thug." How about this one from historian and broadcaster, a good friend of mine, Rafe Hadel-Manku. "According to Starmer, I'm a far-right thug. In World War II, my relatives were murdered by both the Nazis and communists. My father is Sikh. My late mother was Polish. My family came to Britain in 1940 as part of the Polish government in exile. I love Britain. There are loads of these. Donna says, I'm a mum of 2 beautiful mixed-race girls. Their safety and their rights are paramount to me. And according to Keir Starmer, that makes me a far-right thug. We need our leaders to engage with the complex issues facing Britain. To tackle disgusting violence, absolutely. But to listen to the country too. Sir Keir Starmer is the leader of the United Kingdom, but presides over a country more disunited than ever. His divisive rhetoric will make things worse and come back to bite him. Starmer will get his karma. OK, folks, your reaction, please. gbnews.com/your say. But first, tonight's top pundits. We have Joanne Nadler, who is a political commentator, former Labour special advisor, a man with the inside track of the Labour Party, Paul Richards, and broadcaster, author and campaigner, the one and only Chris Wilde. Good to see all three of you. How are we tonight on this rather balmy Sunday evening? Joanne Nadler, I don't think that the Prime Minister has brought the country together this week. What's your thought?
Well, I think he's absolutely right to call out violence and thuggery, and we've seen a lot of violence and thuggery this week, and that's extremely distressing given how the week started with that absolutely incomprehensibly awful attack in Southport.
And a lot of it absolutely the architects of whom the far-right agitators hooking up on, social media based on disinformation, very much driving this trouble.
And I would agree with that element of your monologue. Where I think I take issue slightly is with your characterisation of Keir Starmer, because you seem to be suggesting that he's a bit of an empty vessel and that actually he moves with the wind and we don't really know what his agenda is, whereas I actually think what we're seeing here is somebody who's had a very distinct agenda, and it's really about recreating Britain in the image of human rights lawyers. And this has been something that's been on the move since Blair, but actually he's taking it much further than Blair. And I think that goes to the heart of some of the conversation that we need to have now in the aftermath of all of this. What is actually happening to Britain? Is it the accountable democratic place that we had hoped it was? Are changes being made to our constitution which will mean that people don't feel that they're engaged with the political system, and that an election doesn't really make an appreciable difference to them? And I think that we do ourselves a disservice if we think that Starmer's an empty vessel. I think he's got a very radical agenda, and I think we're beginning to see it play out.
Although, it hasn't, a lot of the issues that we've raised in this big opinion about illegal immigration and also massive legal net migration, that's all happened on the watch of the Tories for 14 years. So we
Absolutely.
can hardly imagine that this was all Keir Starmer's idea or plan, can we?
No, but he's very much an advocate for that. He's not looking to change that in any way. He's more of a cheerleader for that kind of set of policies. That I think that it's almost like the Tories have completely mishandled all of this, and they shouldn't be excluded from scrutiny for all of that. And in fact, they haven't been excluded from scrutiny. They've lost the election. But I do think that a lot of people voted against the Conservatives, and they will have found themselves, partly because of the complication of reform taking a lot of votes, they will have found themselves with a government that's going to take them far further and faster down that same route.
Well, there you go. Paul Richards, this is going to get worse under Labour, suggests Joanne Nadler. What's your view?
I think Starmer is the right man in the right place at the right time. I mean, he's shown how tough he is when he was the DPP, when the last set of riots 10 or so years ago took place, and he made sure that the perpetrators were swiftly dealt with and banged up where appropriate. He said exactly the same now, and I think if the courts have to meet through the night, they have to come back off their holidays to get these people through, then good. We need them locking up.
I agree. I think Keir Starmer is the perfect Prime Minister to lock up hard right agitators who have broken the law, attack cops who are trying to do their job. He is perfect for that.
But you're trying to link these two things through immigration. They're not the same thing.
So he is the right person to do that. All right, thugs that hurt a police officer, banged up, throw away the key, as far as I'm concerned. So Starmer's got my support, but he's got a wider remit. He's the Prime Minister now, and he needs to bring the country together, and he does that by listening to all of his voters and everyone in this country, a large proportion of whom are concerned about our changing society. No acknowledgement of that in his rhetoric so far.
But the immediate threat in front of us is people who are burning down libraries, who are throwing firebombs at the police. And as our Prime Minister, he speaks for all of us in that, saying, stop the violence and bang them up. And that's when you say he's disuniting, I disagree. I think he is uniting the decent majority who are appalled by that.
My viewers and listeners who feel labelled far-right by Keir Starmer for being concerned about the illegal migrant crossings, which are a national security, economic and humanitarian disaster.
I think you're having a laugh if you think the people rioting are doing it as some sort of response to a public policy issue. They are coked up, they are boozed up, they're being subject to, they're being radicalised by Russian misinformation, as you yourself pointed out.
Definitely.
And now they're having a bit of a jolly throwing firebombs, and they need to be arrested.
Others who are concerned about these issues feel labelled far-right because of a lack of nuance from Starmer's...
Well, I think it's not a time for nuance. It's a time for a tough response with putting more police on the streets.
I do hear what you're saying.
As it was after Hare
Half
Hills.
of this, I'm with Starmer all the way, and that's the lawyer Starmer and, you know, ending civil disobedience, protecting our cops.
Yeah.
But a local police chief in the Isle of Wight put out a tweet, which she then deleted, presumably because she got abused for it, in which she said that the Prime Minister needs to address big concerns in our society among millions of people about, you know, a changing Britain that they didn't vote for.
Yeah, and do you know what it is? I think there's a great unrest across the country as well, and I think we're not talking about that. And I think this has been brewing, and I agree with a lot of what you said there, that there's a great unrest. There's most of these far-right rioters, this thuggery, they're rebels without a clue. They don't know why they're doing this. And that's where there's a dichotomy where people like myself, if I have a view, if I have an opinion on this, you know, I'm scared to say anything in case I am branded far-right. But that's why we've got to have that dichotomy. These people, they're not politicians, they're folks. They're people who are hijacking people's traumas and they're using it, and there's certain politicians fanning the flames as well. I think what we need to do is, it's not a time to start calling people out. It's a time for unity. It's a time to get together and look at and get behind Keir Starmer as well. Who would want this job right now? Who would want this job to clean this up?
Don't you think that he should have acknowledged public concerns about legal and illegal immigration, which are the issues that underpin these protests?
But Mark, people's concerns.
Not even a syllable about it.
But there is, Mark, and I think
he didn't say that.
Well, I think he knows it. It's a big job, Mark, and I don't think we can just call it out and say, but he's not looking into it.
Well, there's an immediate problem to deal with, isn't there? Which is is it 90,000 or so illegal migrants that may very well be about to be granted some kind of
Joanne, what's that got to do with smashing up a library?
Well, I agree with... No, I absolutely agree with you, Paul, that these things should not be crudely conflated. However, as we move beyond the initial criminal justice process here, there is a political discussion that needs to be had. And we saw a lot of people out on the streets who haven't been throwing bricks.
Well, indeed, and also
we see people who are frustrated.
Well, he spoke with great eloquence, the Prime Minister, in this most recent statement from Number 10, that if you feel targeted because of your religion, then I'm going to come down on you like a ton of bricks. That's reprehensible. He didn't make such remarks during those weekly peace marches for Gaza, in which anti-Jewish hatred was widely on show. You know, I mean, no such rhetoric from Starmer then. Jews were targeted every weekend for 6 months.
And you and I have discussed that, and you know, we had our views, didn't we? That was
the condemnation.
But that was unacceptable too, where people couldn't walk down their own high streets.
Well, why
I've said that on this programme.
Then now,
well, he's the Prime Minister now, and he is speaking on behalf of the whole. He's talking on behalf of the people with the brooms who are out the next day sweeping up the rubbish. Those are the people. Yeah, those are the people he speaks for.
OK, well, look, it's a fascinating conversation. Yeah, last words.
No, I was going to say, on that point about the marches through London, the point is that parts of the Labour Party have paid obeisance to certain sectarian interests. And this is part of the problem that we're now seeing. There's a sense of unfairness. There is a sense that communities are not being dealt with in the same way.
OK, fascinating. Look, it's going to be in the papers. We will return to this. I think you'll agree. A balanced debate. My pundits don't agree with each other, which is the point of this show. It is the last Mark Dolan tonight until September, so I'm really looking forward to the next hour and 40 minutes. So much to get through. Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Double Standards. A very special take at 10. You won't want to miss it. But next up in the big story, amid accusations of two-tier policing, are Britain's police officers now politically biased, picking and choosing how they enforce the law? I'll be asking a retired top cop next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Prince Harry, he's back again. He's reignited the row over Meghan Markle's shattered relationship with Britain. In an ITV interview aired last night, he explained why he still feels it's too dangerous to bring his wife back to the UK.
It's still dangerous, and all it takes is one lone actor, one person who reads this stuff to act on what they have read, and whether it's a knife or acid, whatever it is, and these are things that are a genuine concern for me. It's one of the reasons why I won't bring my wife back to this country.
So will we ever see Meghan Markle back in Britain? I'm delighted to welcome the former royal correspondent at the Daily Express, Richard Palmer.
Well, I think there is certainly a history of far-right extremists targeting Harry and Meghan. You know, there have been a couple of quite prominent cases, I think. But I'm always a bit perplexed by this argument that Harry comes up with, because if you look at, say, homicide rates, comparing the US and the UK, the last figures I saw, you were about four times more likely to be murdered in the US than you are in the UK. And sure, we've got our problems over here, but you know, given that they've got such a high prevalence of people with guns over there, I would have thought the risks were higher over there than over here. And I think we have seen increasingly in the last couple of years that they have become polarising figures in the US as well as in the UK. Perhaps not quite to the same extent, but there does seem to be a bit of a political divide, that if you're a Democrat, you're perhaps more likely to be sympathetic towards Harry and Meghan. If you're a Republican, not so much.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'll get to your messages shortly, but it's time now for the big story. And let's get the latest in what is feared by some to be the prospect of a summer of political violence following riots in Southport and beyond. To discuss this, I'm delighted to welcome retired police officer of 25 years turned author Robert Soul. Let me tell you about Robert's book. It is out now. Have we got a still of that one? Let's have a look. It's called Barking Mad, the true story of a former serious organised crime agency detective who went mad in spectacular fashion after 17 years undercover, but survived and came out the other side dancing. Barking Mad by Robert Soul, former top cop who joins me now. Robert, lovely to see you.
Nice to meet you as well, Mark.
Welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
Did you come in the electric car again?
I didn't, no.
Right.
Never will have buy one.
No, because that basically kind of ran out of steam halfway down the M1 or something.
Yeah, the terrible thing was it was the A3 northbound out of Portsmouth, the arterial route, and you can't buy electric.
All right, but you see, Ed Miliband wants us all in electric cars. What's your answer
Well, they're
to
going to have to dump it up pretty quickly, because the charging points I did find when I got to Guildford charge at 7 kilowatts an hour. that means 2 hours to charge your car. I was third in the queue. That's 6 hours at the charging point.
No.
It's never going to work.
It's
not without the infrastructure being 10 times, 50 times better.
It's my catchphrase on the show, make it make sense.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Listen, delighted to have you here with us. Let's talk about these riots. First of all, it's very clear that a lot of the trouble has been driven by these far-right agitators, right?
I would disagree with that.
OK, go on, because I was going to ask you how big a problem is the far-right in this country?
Well, I never really came across the far-right was in the police, but there were some football hooligans. And whenever there's a riot in any shape or a protest in any shape or form, you always get the guys who go there looking for a fight.
Yeah. So they're thugs?
They are, absolutely. If you go looking for a fight, you're a thug. But most people are up to their ears with the immigration. You know, and it's not a Labour problem, it's a political problem. If that young lad had killed those 3 kids the month before, Rishi Sunak would have been getting the bullet for it. And I've never been political. I've never voted in my life. Right. I've never trusted any of them. Because if you have a group of dishonest people at the top of your food chain, how do you expect the people below to behave?
Right.
And they're dishonest.
So you would say, for example, David Cameron's government, when they said we'll get immigration down to the tens of thousands, last year, 700,000, same government.
Yeah, and all they do is they use smoke and mirrors with it. And I'll take you back to when I joined in 1984, my first encounter, 1986, with illegal immigration. Stopped 4 guys in the car because they were driving awfully, pulled them out, no ID, no passports, no driving licence, no documents. Took them to Hammersmith police station. I was on my own, booked them in, rang immigration. What's the score? Well, I've got these 4 guys. What they're saying their names are. Gave them the names. Oh, yeah, they're definitely illegal. I said, what are we going to do? Immigration said, well, put them in a taxi, which we'll pay for, to a bail hostel in Lewisham.
A what? A bail hostel?
A bail hostel in Lewisham.
All right, so that's
bail them to the bail hostel in Lewisham.
Accommodation.
A bail hostel, though, in Lewisham. Give them conditional bail to go there. No problem. A couple of hours later, a taxi driver rang me back at the station. They ran away when I pulled up.
Extraordinary.
So that's 84. And since then,
So we've had decades of that.
We've had 40 years of it.
Yeah.
And when I joined the police in 84, there were already small ghettos and places where the police were frightened to go, like Stoke Newington, Hackney, Peckham, Brixton. Police were frightened to go there unless they were mob-handed.
And of course,
that can't be right.
This is replicated in the north of England, the Midlands.
It's replicated everywhere now.
But you can't surely push back on this idea that what we saw in Southport on Tuesday wasn't, you know, a lot of racist, angry men looking for trouble, who just hate foreigners and want to go back to the 1950s. I mean, you could say far right, you could just call them racist thugs, but is the Prime Minister not right to focus on that or to identify that?
No, I think he needs to get the bigger picture going, because so many people I talk to every day in all walks of life in different parts of the country, they've had enough. Right. They don't want their country taken over. And I don't mean that in a horrible way. If they come over here by the right routes and they speak the right language and they get the right jobs and they contribute to society, absolutely fine, but that's not the case. There's lads roaming in every city in the UK, because we travel, me and my partner, every city. It's frightening. There's tension. You can feel it in the air. Birmingham, you can feel the tension. The Bullring, you can feel the tension. You can feel the tension up north. And I'm a northerner.
Well, a former top cop just a few months ago, writing in a Telegraph, pointed out that we had several years of Albanians coming into the country illegally, even though Albania is not a war-torn country. It's probably more peaceful than the Isle of Wight. And the Germans have been refusing Albanians for years now, but we're soft touch on that one. My understanding from this article by a former top cop writing in the Telegraph is that most of the drug gangs in this country are now controlled by Albanians.
Absolutely. In fact, down where I live in Portsmouth, there's a WhatsApp number available to people, and you can ring it. It's an Albanian guy will be with you in 10 minutes for a gram of coke. And it's a WhatsApp group.
Yeah, you can give me his number later, but I work in TV. Old habits die hard. What about two-tier policing? Do we have that, or is that unfair slur on...
100% right. And I've only been on social media now for the last 6 months because of my covert life. I shied away from putting my face in public.
Yeah.
And I'm here now today because I feel so desperate things need doing. Right. I didn't want to put myself on offer. There are contracts on my head to kill me. I've locked away some serious people in my time. But the country's got to change. The police have got to change. They've got to go back to being crime fighters, not revenue collectors.
They did do the right thing on Tuesday, didn't they? And they did the right thing 2 nights ago in Sunderland, which is to crack down on violence and you know, police stations being burned down, right? Were you happy with their actions of...
I'd like the police to be... This is when I joined the police, and I used to deal with them the same. The police should deal with people the way the people are dealing with them.
Right. Right.
So there's an unmitigated amount of violence in London against people who have stood still.
Yeah.
And they need to balance. They need to be equal with them. If you're going to beat people because they're in a protest situation, then do that to every section of the community equally.
Yeah.
Equally as harsh.
Is there a political problem with Keir Starmer's approach to what happened this week? Because he does seem to have focused quite a lot on the far right and no acknowledgement of these simmering tensions within the country.
He's detracting from... He's using the far right as a reason not to deal with it. And the whole immigration thing. The whole migrants thing is a scam. We have been invaded by stealth. I'm an undercover...
Now, isn't invaded a rather inflammatory term?
Well, you can say that.
Maybe offensive, Robert?
I don't think it's offensive because it's factual. It's factual if it's not right. If it's wrong if it's not right.
If someone enters the country, you know, fleeing for their lives or wanting to make a better life, could you really call that an invasion? No, but it's not that, is it? They've been through Italy, Germany, France, and then to the UK. And they're piled up on the French side coming over. And back in the 2005, I was a boat captain as undercover for the police. Yeah. They asked me to hire a boat for £1,000 a day, go and pick up a load of illegal migrants in Belgium, but we were dealing with the European government and then the Court of Human Rights and all that sort of stuff. And when I was waiting for this authority to go, and then the boss said, oh, we've just had a direction from the European Court, you can't go until... you've got red life jackets for every passenger. And I said, sir, criminals don't issue life jackets to passengers. And that's amply demonstrated. Now, if you went to the news footage for the arrivals at Italy, there's not a life jacket in sight. But for every boat coming across the channel, red life jackets, because health and safety of the European Union won't allow them to board the boats. Now, I'm not saying they're... But what they could do, as you say, I mean, in a way it makes them complicit. But if they're putting a life jacket on someone that's about to break the law and enter another country, then in some ways, in a court of law, there would be some connection there, an accomplice.
Yeah, but the thing is, what you have to remember is, over on the French side, we aren't allowed to operate without permission. As an undercover cop, I can't go over to the French side.
You don't have jurisdiction.
I'm not allowed to operate without permission. So I can't go over there and have a look at the migrant side, but the French undercover cops can. And that's not happening. The NCA has been in existence since 2013, the premier detective agency in the world, allegedly. Their results could be written about on a stamp with a pickaxe, as far as the channel's concerned.
Elegantly put. Well, listen, we know you got away with words because your book is out now. James, let's have another look at this. It's got to be a bestseller. I've got a huge audience, so let's shift a few copies, shall we, Robert? Barking Mad, the true story of a former serious organised crime agency detective. It's by Robert Soul. It's out now. Robert, we'll have to get you back in the studio. We'll get you a Tesla or something so you can reach Paddington in one piece. Yes. My thanks to Robert Soul. Next up, how does the next Tory leader solve a problem like Nigel Farage? See you in 2.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. It remains unsettled over the next 24 hours, particularly across western parts of Scotland. Drier further southeast and turning increasingly humid as well. A deep area of low pressure sits to the northwest of the UK. Outbreaks of rain pushing in from the Atlantic, but also drawing in some quite warm and humid air. Through the rest of Sunday into the early hours of Monday, rain across parts of Northern Ireland into Scotland, this turning increasingly heavy. Met Office warning in place across western parts of Scotland right through until the end of Monday. Temperatures overnight, despite clear spells even in the south, remaining in mid-teens for many, 14 to 16 Celsius. So a mild, muggy start to Monday. Best of the sunshine across southeastern areas, but heavy rain across western parts of Scotland. You can see the bright colours there. So some tricky travelling conditions first thing, with this slowly pushing northeastwards through the day. Northern Ireland as well, seeing outbreaks of rain push in now and then, and temperatures around 19 or 20 Celsius, so a muggy start to the day. Cloudy across Wales, the West Country, with some drizzle over the hills, but that sunshine from the word go across southeast England. As we go through the day, rain continues to push north and eastwards across Northern Ireland, affecting parts of Scotland. It'll be here where it'll be heavy at times. Western parts of northern England, Wales also seeing the risk of some rain, which will turn heavy later on in the day. Best of the dry and bright weather holding on further south and east, where it will be warm and humid, temperatures reaching 25 to 27 Celsius, a little fresher across the far northwest, highs around 19 degrees here. For Tuesday, this weather front eventually starts pushing its way south and eastwards, clearing much of the UK through the morning. Showers, though, pushing in across Northern Ireland, western Scotland, some of these heavy at times, and generally a fresher feel for all. Further showery rain expected through the middle towards the end of the week as well. See you soon.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a very special take at 10. The last take at 10 until September. Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of double standards. But first, the competition to replace Rishi Sunak as Tory party leader is hotting up. But which of the candidates is the best to take on the electoral threat of Reform UK? And how does the next Tory leader solve a problem like Nigel Farage? Let's ask my top pundits, Joanne Nadler, Paul Richards and Chris Wilde. Chris.
Yes, Mark.
What do you think about this? Because actually, that's the biggest headache for the Tories. He's not really Sir Keir Starmer. He's going to be Prime Minister for the next 5 years.
Yes.
It's one Nigel Farage, because he's got 4 million votes in his back pocket.
He's a massive threat, and not just a threat. I use that word cautiously. He's very popular. He's very popular with young voters who would normally vote Labour or Conservative.
Yep.
And you know, and the conversations I've had recently, people are saying, well, why is he not the leader of the Conservative Party? And then people are saying that's what's going to happen in 5 years. You're going to have someone like Farage, the leader of the Conservative Party. Reform and Conservatives are not that much different, are they? I mean, I think they've got the same policies, they've got the same ideology.
Yeah.
And I think he'll be a great leader for the Conservatives. Not my leader, but he might be a good leader.
Paul, you're shaking your head in disgust.
Well, I don't think he is a Conservative in the sort of traditional sense of that word. I'm not one myself, as you know, Mark, but I've always said...
free market, strong...
I think he's a sort of right-wing populist, but I don't think he's part of the British Conservative tradition.
What would you say the difference is between right-wing populist and Conservative?
Well, I think Conservatives have a sort of civic duty. I think there's a sort of noblesse oblige. There's a sense of there is a society there that needs to be managed in a way, and it's a tradition within British politics, not one that I agree with necessarily.
You'd say also not extreme either. Not extreme.
It's not extreme, and and historically centrist.
So, Joanne Nadler, Chris has given us a story here. Isn't the elephant in the room that the leader the Tories need is the leader of another party already, Nigel Farage?
No, I don't think that's the case at all. I mean, I certainly don't think that the Conservatives should disparage Nigel Farage. In general, there may be moments that he needs to be disparaged and disagreed with, but I don't think
disparaged.
Quite. But I mean, many Conservatives, I'm not one of them, but many would say that there is an equal threat from the left flank, as it were, from the Liberal Democrats. That you've had this dilemma for Conservatives whether they should face towards the blue wall or face towards the red wall. And I think what we're seeing with some of the leadership candidates is a desire to try and bring those two wings together, which seems to me to be actually a completely false errand, because it's almost impossible to do it. I think whoever emerges as the leader has to have a clear policy agenda of their own, and if it means that they do lose some people from either end of the party, I think there's a certain inevitability about that, and it's been the failure to grasp that that's actually kept the Conservative mired in this kind of indefinite sort of fudge that they've been in for many recent years.
Joanne, you know the Tory party well. Briefly, if you can, who is the candidate of, I think it's 7 who've thrown their hats into the ring? Who is the candidate? Is it 6? Who of the 6 can neutralise Nigel Farage?
Well, I don't think it's so much about neutralising him. I think it is about opposing where necessary, but being willing to take on some of the causes that he's championed also where necessary.
And which
to me,
of those 6 are the most likely to do that, do you think?
So I think, without doubt, it's got to be Kemi Badenoch, because I think she has got a clear agenda, and I think she's been quite astute, actually, in saying that she's distinct from Farage, whereas some of the other candidates weren't quite sure how to pitch that.
Yeah. And Meghan will be Farage light. Listen, we're going to discuss more of this in the papers with my top pundits. Don't forget, we've got a very interesting take at 10 coming up. Harry and Meghan will not come to the UK because it's too dangerous. Instead, they're off to crime-ridden Colombia, murder capital of the world. I'll be dealing with the Duke and Duchess of double standards in no uncertain terms in my take at 10. But next up, can Team GB, that's right, not GB News, Team GB have their best Olympics ever? I'll be asking my Mark Meets guest, legendary ski jumper, Eddie, the Eagle, Edwards. He's waiting, he's got his goggles on. See you in 2.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
A new report suggests that Prince Harry is lonely in California and he's considering returning to Britain despite a seismic falling out with his father and his brother.
But the question we're asking this morning is whether Meghan would come with her Prince Charming or whether Harry would perhaps be more welcome here if he came solo.
Like Kinsey, we'll go to Kinsey Schofield live now in LA. Kinsey, we've got lots of time to talk about this and speculate this. We've got about 6 minutes or so to talk. But what's behind all of this? Where are these thoughts coming from?
They're coming from royal author Hugo Vickers, and I don't know if you're familiar with Mr. Vickers, but he's written over 30 books about the British royal family. And he told The Sun that Prince Harry will ultimately return to the UK with his tail between his legs. He described the Duke of Sussex as angry and says Harry is genuinely petrified of losing his wife, Meghan Markle. When asked his predictions for where Harry and Meghan will be in the next 20 years, Vickers told The Sun, I think he'll come home, explaining, I think Harry will come home, and if he comes home, we must be very nice to him because he won't particularly want to. He's quite angry, suggesting that he would be coming home solo. Vickers also said that Prince Harry looks slightly petrified of Meghan Markle and that King Charles has left the door wide open for Harry's return if and when he does decide to come back.
I can only imagine the culture shock that Prince Harry has faced arriving there. This is a kid that has grown up in castles.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Now, the emails are coming in thick and fast. gbnews.com/your say. Michael, who is a GB News member, says, Mark, Kemi is bright and unafraid to take the fight to the woke. She is my favourite. I'm still ruminating on who I think the best candidate would be, but she's certainly in the top 2 in my mind. In September, I will declare, but not until then. Alan says, Nigel Farage understands and give it a chance. He will solve the problem. Also, Adrian is not happy about the people that enter the country illegally. He says they've come from a safe country, France. They've invaded us in their thousands. No women and no children. What is going on? Listen, fascinating stuff. A lot of you enjoyed the interview with former cop Robert Soule as well. Watching Mark Dolan, he's a retired police officer on, says Leslie. Robert Soule, how refreshing to hear a man who understands the current situation. OK, Harry and Meghan at 10, but first Mark Meads. And tonight, Olympic legend Eddie the Eagle Edwards. Now, in 1988, Eddie became the first competitor to represent Great Britain in Olympic ski jumping, finishing last. His life story was a movie in 2016 starring Taron Egerton. That movie was called Eddie the Eagle. I caught up with him earlier to ask him about his life. Eddie, who first introduced you to a pair of skis?
Actually, it was my school sports teacher. He was very keen skier, and he used to organise ski trips for the school, and he invited me along when I was in the 3rd year, and that was it. My life changed completely.
Listen, you are world famous as a ski jumper. Can you tell me about your emotions and what is going through your head as you fly through the air?
Well, it depends on whether the jump is going well or going badly. It's either the most exciting thing you've ever done in your life, or it's the most terrifying thing you've ever done in your life. It just depends what happens at that takeoff. But that's what I love about the sport. It's very unpredictable. The wind can do lots of silly things and play tricks on your mind. But it's the most amazing, exciting sport that I've ever done, and I still love doing it to this day.
Well, you were and are a very talented athlete. You've done great things in the sport. So clearly you've got the physical prowess. But is your mental makeup different to the rest of us as well? Are you naturally fearless?
No, I'm not naturally fearless. I'm actually quite nervous, just like everybody else. I just use my nervousness, my fear, in a different way, and I use it to, I focus more, I concentrate more, because I don't want to hurt myself. I certainly don't want to kill myself. I just focus and do what I'm told to the letter, and then I know I'll be safe. But and I'm always stretching. I'm always pushing the boundaries. So if I jump 50 meters, I want to jump 55. If I jump 55, I want to jump 60. So I'm constantly pushing and trying to be better and longer and faster and stronger, and that's what I love.
Tell me about that first Olympics in which you participated. Did you feel the weight on your shoulders, given that a whole nation was watching?
Yes, I mean it was a dream come true to get to Calgary in 1988. Absolutely amazing, and I loved being there. I loved representing Great Britain in ski jumping, and I was hoping to go on to further Olympics and become a much bigger and better ski jumper. Unfortunately, that wasn't to be, but to jump there at Calgary was just a dream come true. And even though it happened over 36 years ago, I can remember it like it was yesterday.
Well, listen, you were a heroic figure at those Olympics, but some people like to kind of look at your achievements in a kind of humorous way. Did you ever feel that you were mocked or possibly just sort of underestimated for your great skill?
Yes, I was always mocked, ever since I put on a pair of skis, really. I was mocked all the way through, but it didn't matter. I laughed with them. I just did the best I could with what I had. And, if it put a smile on people's faces, that was great. And, underneath all that, my dream was to carry on and be the best skier and then the best ski jumper that I could be. And, it didn't really matter if people mocked me. I just laughed with them and carried on. That's the best way, I think, to deal with it.
Most definitely. And what about fame? How did you adapt to becoming such a well-known figure in the country?
It was surprising. Jumping at Calgary was wonderful, but becoming Eddie the Eagle and then traveling all over the world and becoming, very, very popular, that was very strange. And I had to get used to it very quickly. It happened literally overnight. But I adapted very well. I loved meeting people. I met some very interesting people from film, television, music, royalty, government, all that kind of thing. And they were lovely. And it's been great fun. I've had some amazing experiences, travel all over the world, opened shopping centres, golf courses, fun rides, did lots of weird and wonderful things, and it's been absolutely amazing.
Ski jumping is not without its risk. Have you ever faced major peril? Have you ever risked your life on a pair of skis?
I'm risking my life every day on a pair of skis. But with ski jumping, it wasn't too bad. I did about 30,000 jumps. I fractured my skull twice. I broke my jaw in 2 places, smashed my collarbone in 5 places, broke 3 ribs, damaged my kidney, damaged my knee. But I've broken just about every bone in my body doing one thing or another. For me, there was just a little bit of inconvenience. It stopped me doing things I wanted to do for a couple of weeks. And then once I was healed, I was back out there carrying on. It never stopped me doing what I wanted to do.
I don't know whether maybe you should write a self-help book, Eddie, because I think you could be very inspiring to a lot of us. Ski jumping is terrifying, and you've had to come back, as you say, after, perilous falls. How do you get on top of that fear? How can fear be tackled? Because it's something that all of us face in daily life.
Oh, yes. I mean, when you're standing at the top of the jump and you're getting ready to go, you could be 400 feet up the top and you can see and feel a million different reasons why you shouldn't really go down. But you want to jump further than you've ever jumped before. And to do that, you've got to risk more than you've ever risked before. And to help overcome that, I found visualization techniques were very, very good. So I could sit in a dark room or just sit in my kitchen at home, close my eyes, and imagine myself going up to the top of the ski jump, putting my skis on, sliding out onto that bar, putting my skis in the tracks, and off I go. And I could see and feel everything that I would see and feel coming down that jump and taking off and flying through the air. So visualization really helps with your fear. You learn to expect the unexpected and to face those fears and face those dangers. And hopefully you calm down and you focus, and hopefully everything will be okay. But visualization is a very, very good technique.
What makes you want to still do these perilous ski jumps to this day?
Because it makes me feel alive, and I always like pushing the envelope. Even now, I'm nearly 61, but I still want to go faster. I want to be better at things that I do. I still like my ski jumping. I still love my skiing, and I'm always up for doing anything and everything. And that's what makes life worth living. I appreciate the times when I'm not doing those kind of things and leading a more normal life. But once in a while, I just want to stretch my boundaries, my mental and physical boundaries, and have some fun.
There's not too many people that have had a movie made about them where their name is the title. Tell me about that experience and being played by the very handsome Taron Egerton.
Yes, when I went to Calgary 36 years ago, having a movie made about my life was not on my radar at all. And then, of course, they made Cool Runnings, which was the same Olympics, about the Jamaican bobsled team. But to have a movie made was just incredible. Taron played me so well. He sounded, he acted, and he looked just like me 36 years ago. He played me so well. And to have Hugh Jackman as my coach as well was amazing. And they did a wonderful job. I really, really love the film. It still makes me laugh and cry now. They really captured the heart and spirit and essence of my story, and they did it in such a lovely way, and I still love watching the film to this day. I've seen it over 150 times and I love it.
Wow. Eddie the Eagle Edwards, you were a hero then and you are a hero today. Thank you so much for joining us on Mark Dolan tonight.
Thank you, much appreciated.
I love that man, Eddie the Eagle Edwards. In my take at 10, Harry and Meghan, Duke and Duchess of Double Standards.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. It remains unsettled over the next 24 hours, particularly across western parts of Scotland. Drier further southeast and turning increasingly humid as well. A deep area of low pressure sits to the northwest of the UK. Outbreaks of rain pushing in from the Atlantic, but also drawing in some quite warm and humid air. Through the rest of Sunday into the early hours of Monday, rain across parts of Northern Ireland into Scotland, this turning increasingly heavy. Met Office warning in place across western parts of Scotland right through until the end of Monday. Temperatures overnight, despite clear spells even in the south, remaining in mid-teens for many, 14 to 16 Celsius. So a mild, muggy start to Monday. Best of the sunshine across southeastern areas, but heavy rain across western parts of Scotland. You can see the bright colours there. So some tricky travelling conditions first thing, with this slowly pushing northeastwards through the day. Northern Ireland as well, seeing outbreaks of rain push in now and then, and temperatures around 19 or 20 Celsius, so a muggy start to the day. Cloudy across Wales, the West Country, with some drizzle over the hills, but that sunshine from the word go across southeast England. As we go through the day, rain continues to push north and eastwards across Northern Ireland, affecting parts of Scotland. It'll be here where it'll be heavy at times. Western parts of northern England, Wales also seeing the risk of some rain, which will turn heavy later on in the day. Best of the dry and bright weather holding on further south and east, where it will be warm and humid, temperatures reaching 25 to 27 Celsius, a little fresher across the far northwest, highs around 19 degrees here. For Tuesday, this weather front eventually starts pushing its way south and eastwards, clearing much of the UK through the morning. Showers, though, pushing in across Northern Ireland, western Scotland, some of these heavy at times, and generally a fresher feel for all. Further showery rain expected through the middle towards the end of the week as well. See you soon.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss out on your chance to win a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. It's extra cash that could really make a difference to your coming year. You could find yourself on that holiday you've always wanted to take, buy that treat that always seemed out of reach, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could be yours. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have said Stump. You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
went everywhere. Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday,
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
It's 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is the last Mark Dolan Tonight until September. Lots to pack in My Take at 10. Harry and Meghan will not come to the UK because it's too dangerous. Instead, they're off to crime-ridden Colombia, murder capital of the world. I'll be dealing with the Duke and Duchess of double standards in no uncertain terms. Also tonight, should the government put the army on the streets to keep law and order? I'll be asking former Home Office Minister Anne Widdicombe. Plus, tomorrow's newspaper front pages, a packed show, lots to get through. It's a very special show because let me tell you that my amazing executive producer, James Gibson, is moving on. I'm going to miss him hugely because I've been here 3 years. He was my boss right from the start. He's an amazing guy. Let me tell you that he's funny, he's clever and a brilliant producer. Why he's going to the BBC is anyone's guess. Thank you, James, and good luck. Stay in touch, buddy. OK, lots to get through. Harry and Meghan are going to get rinsed in the Take at 10. It's the last Take at 10 until September. Don't miss it. Get the kettle on. I'll see you after the headlines with Tatiana Sanchez, who's loyal and staying here.
Mark, thank you very much and good evening. The top stories this hour. Merseyside Police says 6 people have been charged after disorder in Southport, Liverpool city centre and Walton in the past week. Those arrested include a man charged with committing violent disorder in Liverpool city centre after a group were seen throwing stones, bricks and missiles at police yesterday. The Prime Minister earlier vowed rioters would regret taking part in what he called far-right thuggery in England as the government announced emergency security for mosques amid the threat of further disorder. Earlier today, anti-immigration demonstrators attacked police and smashed the windows of a hotel in Rotherham. One person's been arrested on suspicion of public order offences there. Police say that 10 officers were injured. Over 100 people were arrested yesterday. It comes after 3 little girls were killed in a knife attack at a dance club in Southport almost a week ago. Sir Keir Starmer says those causing violent trouble will face convictions.
I won't shy away from calling it what it is, far-right thuggery. To those who feel targeted because of the colour of your skin or your faith, I know how frightening this must be. I want you to know that this violent mob do not represent our country and we will bring them to justice.
9 people have been arrested in Middlesbrough as cars were set alight and missiles thrown at police. Large scuffles broke out earlier between police and anti-immigration protesters. The unrest spread during a protest which started at the town's cenotaph this afternoon. Groups pushed burning wheelie bins at a line of police officers and a car was set alight on Parliament Road. The police service in Northern Ireland says those involved in violence which erupted following anti-immigration protests in Belfast will be dealt with using the full force of the law. It's after a supermarket owner in Belfast says his business has been reduced to ashes after it was targeted during the disorder. Northern Ireland's First Minister Michelle O'Neill says those involved in violence on the streets of Belfast should be quickly brought before the courts. This morning, a clean-up operation was underway in the Donegal Road area following last night's unrest. In the US, Tropical Storm Debbie is expected to strengthen rapidly into a hurricane before making landfall in Florida's Big Bend region. The National Weather Service says Debbie will make landfall tomorrow morning, bringing hurricane conditions to the area. Historic levels of rain up to 30 inches are expected in Georgia and South Carolina through to Friday. Preparing for Debbie, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis called up 3,000 National Guard troops and placed most of Florida's cities and counties under emergency orders. And sport, an emotional Novak Djokovic produced a stunning display to defeat rival Carlos Alcaraz to win his first Olympic gold medal and complete a career Golden Slam. Djokovic's impressive career already featured a men's record, 24 Grand Slam titles, and the most weeks spent at #1 in the rankings by any man or any woman. Today, he battled to a 7-6, 7-6 win over the same man who just beat him in this year's Wimbledon final. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Tatiana. Congratulations to Novak Djokovic for winning Olympic gold. Imagine how many more medals he'd have won if he'd been vaccinated. Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. Should the government put the army on the streets to keep law and order? I'll be asking former Home Office Minister, the formidable no-nonsense Anne Widdicombe. Plus, tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from tonight's top pundits this evening. Political commentator Joanne Nadler, former Labour Special Advisor Paul Richards, and campaigner and author Chris Wilde. A packed hour, those papers are coming. This is the last Mark Dolan Tonight until September. I'm going to miss you hugely. So let's pack a lot in to the next 60 minutes, and we start with my take at 10. What is this fresh hell? Harry and Meghan are going to do another world tour, which includes a trip to meet locals in crime-ridden Colombia. May God help them. Have the people of Colombia not suffered enough? What's scarier, the ruthless bosses of the drug cartels, or Harry and Meghan's grinning faces as they pose for photos? Give me the man with gold teeth and tattoos all day long. And whether we like it or not, to a great extent, Harry and Meghan still represent the United Kingdom. A financial crash and 4 prime ministers in 2 years isn't nearly as embarrassing for this country as this ungodly pair carting themselves around the world on our behalf like a posh Thelma and Louise. Of course, if they relinquished their titles, it would be a private trip. But I can think of a few million reasons why they've decided to remain Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Meghan Markle, a few years ago, a struggling actress who wasn't even the best thing in Suits. And Prince Harry, the world's least happy millionaire. Well, they're both about to jump on a plane and export their own unique brand of self-pity to the good people of South America, some of whom live on £1 a day. But I'm sure they'd spare £1 or two to stop the flight. This is a couple who request privacy while doing TV interviews, podcasts and books about their innermost lives. They preach about global warming whilst darting around the world in a private jet. And their double standards reached a new high this week, with the news that whilst Harry is unwilling to bring his family to the UK for safety reasons, they will fly to Colombia, which has one of the highest murder rates in the world. One positive about the Colombia trip is that old Harry, as a former self-confessed drug user, will be able to connect with a couple of his old suppliers. I'm sure Mr. Big would welcome a royal visit. But who is Harry to march around Colombia, boring locals to tears about net zero, phone hacking, and his terrible life rattling around a 16-bathroom Californian mansion? He'll be in a country where many don't even have an indoor loo at all. Now, controversially, I actually share Harry's concerns about the safety of him and his family. I really do. I think that he, Meghan and the kids should have top-level armed royal protection wherever they go. For me, their safety is money no object. I would pay more taxes to protect them. Why? Because whilst Harry has left the family and given up his royal duties, it was not his decision to be born the son of the king. And look what happened to Donald Trump just a few weeks ago. But the Sussexes can't have it both ways. They say they face danger in the UK, but they've just come back from Nigeria, which is about as safe as a road trip with Stevie Wonder. And now they're off to dangerous South America. Well, this couple have been heading south for a while now. Why don't they do us all a favour, jump on a plane, and this time make it a one-way ticket? The Duke and Duchess of Double Standards strike again. I'll get to your thoughts shortly. gbnews.com/your say. But first, tonight's top pundits, political commentator Joanne Nadler, former Labour Special Advisor Paul Richards, and campaigner and author Chris Wilde. Great to have all three of you with me. Paul, Harry and Meghan Can't have it both ways. They're saying Britain's dangerous. They're off to Colombia, where they risk being kidnapped. Make it make sense.
I just don't care. Do you know what I mean? I just don't care. I think they should just stay at home, do whatever they want to do the garden, keep an allotment, you know, just mind their own business and just keep out of the public eye. I think they've made a decision about not wanting to be part of the royal family. Fair dues. They've left the United Kingdom, also fair dues. But now they keep popping up with these sort of PR trips. And I just, honestly, I couldn't care less.
Well, absolutely, Paul. And listen, you've got kindness in your heart. You're not a judgmental person. And viewers and listeners might ask me why I've devoted a take of 10 to this.
Good
and I'll
question,
tell you why I
Mark.
think it's important,
Why have
Paul.
you?
Well, too right. But I think it's important, Paul, because the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, is currently suing the Home Office to get top-level royal protection. That is something that I support, because I think he should have it when he's here, because he didn't choose to be the King's son. But this is the same man that's saying Britain's too dangerous, so he needs armed protection, and he's off to a country which is frankly lawless.
Well, I imagine they'll look after him well and he will get the protection that he needs anywhere in the world. I mean, it is a dangerous place in certain parts, I'm sure, but the places he's going to, he'll be well armed and guarded.
Safer than Windsor?
But, well, what we know is that nowhere is safe, is it, if somebody's intent on doing harm to public figures. So, of course, he needs that protection. But, honestly, I just think there's more important things for us to be... You know, our cities are going up in flames and there's all kinds of terrible things happening in the world. This really, who cares?
Well, most definitely. But actually, Joanne Nadler, I'll also make another point, which is I was on air about 4 weeks ago when I got a call from the boss saying somebody has tried to shoot Donald Trump. You need to tear up the running order and get into rolling news mode. And suddenly, you know, the world looked like a very different place. It's a miracle and it's a relief that Donald Trump didn't die, because I think it would have created a civil war in America. I don't want anything to happen to Harry and Meghan. I think they need royal protection. I think Harry's right. I think they are a target, which is why it's utter insanity for them to travel around the world to some of the most dangerous countries on the planet.
Well, as you say, it does seem to be hugely inconsistent, but I'm a little bit with Paul on this. I'm finding it difficult to get quite as aerated as you are about this matter. And that's partly because I think I felt more keenly about their kind of disrespect, if you like, for their own family and for this country while the late Queen was still alive. I think, you know, there is a family tragedy being played out here, because we know that the King and the Prince have not been able to reach some kind of understanding, which is just very, very sad. But beyond that, I have to say, I can't really get terribly interested in this couple, and I'm very much with Paul. I just think, you know, if they're going to claim royal status, which they still do by keeping these titles, then really they should be living a much more quiet life. And if they're going to go to Colombia, and it's difficult to see why they are going there, it's not the obvious place for them to be promoting Meghan's new lifestyle brand, for instance. But if they are going to go there, perhaps they could do something to draw attention to the damage that the international drugs trade does to the wider community and to many of the communities, quite frankly, that we're seeing so distressed in so many ways now, here and elsewhere.
Most definitely. The issue is, Chris Wilde, that on this programme, we speak truth to power. I've actually got terrible abuse online for talking about Harry and Meghan. It's like I didn't realise that princes and millionaire actresses were the latest protected class. Well, let me tell you, they're not protected on my watch, OK? No. Same as Hugh Edwards. A year ago, I got dog's abuse for covering that story, completely vindicated. And if it's Keir Starmer, if it's Hugh Edwards, if it's Harry and Meghan, I don't care who you are. If you're powerful and you're rich and you have a massive public platform, I will call you out. And I think this is weapons-grade hypocrisy from Harry to say that Britain is so dangerous and he needs royal protection, and he's off to South America, probably to be bundled into the back of a van by someone called Mr. Big.
Yeah, and I think people respect your opinions, Mark. Well, that's why you get that kind of abuse. Away. But no, I agree with you. I think they're the gift that keep on giving, aren't they? And it's hard to be too engrossed in what's happening to them both. But listen, on on a positive note, they are humanitarians, and like the panel say, if you're going to go to places like Colombia, then speak up against the cartel, protect all them young children who are dying through drug trades, but also, you know, bear in mind who you are and where you come from. You know, the country is on the precipice of a disaster at the moment, and their voice could be very powerful here as well, and that's what they should be focusing on.
Well, I think you're right. To be fair to the couple, they are going to go there. They're going to talk about child safety and online safety, and they've been very good on that. They do good stuff. We've got the Invictus Games. You know, the messaging from the couple is generally pretty humanitarian, but it's just the double standards. You know, it's the private jets and then net zero, and it's, you know, Britain is a dangerous, lawless hellhole, but we're off to Colombia. I mean, it really is extraordinary. But look, what do you think, folks? Are the couple guilty of wild double standards? gbnews.com/your say. But next up, should the government put the army on the streets to keep law in order? I'll be asking former Home Office Minister Anne Widdicombe, who is waiting in the wings, let me tell you, in a tank. See you in 2.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
One local cricket team was made up entirely of one family, the Jolans.
The Newmarket midweek seconds played Thurlow and Old Mill Greenian seconds, captained by, here we go, James Jolland. He played alongside family members Henry, Freddie, George, Jack, Archie, Ryan, Brandon and Daniel. Even if slightly controversial, one of the umpires was a Jolland to Stephen the umpire.
Yes, well, the Jolland family mostly live in Wickhambrook in Suffolk and have played for 4 years. But Dullingham Village team before it merged with Newmarket. So that's the entire backstory. We're delighted to be joined now by Captain James Jolland and teammate and brother Nick Jolland. Really good to see you both this morning. This is incredible. How did you get the entire family involved in cricket?
Well, we started the club about 3 years ago, and it was more friends and family. But then it had this opportunity of this week to get everyone involved, because everyone was back and they all played cricket, various levels, and the youngest being 12, George, and we're all available. So we thought 1 week we'd do the whole team.
You booted the friends out for 1 week only?
Yeah, they were very good about it. They come and watched. They supported us.
How did the other team feel about having an umpire with related ties?
Well, the captain of the Thurlow is one of our friends. We do know him, so he was fine with it, and there was no controversial decisions at all.
I think it's a fantastic strategy.
No, yeah.
You could plant somebody.
That's the way
in a position of authority. It's a great idea.
Oh, look, here's the scorecard we can see on the screen with all of your names on there. Some fantastic English names on there. How does it get between the family members? Is it very, very competitive between you all?
As you get older, you work on that, don't you? And you keep that competitiveness out of it. And it's really to play with your sons. It's a great thing to do.
Yeah, it's a lovely
We've
thing
all
to
got
do.
sons in it. That's why we do it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true.
You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. A very busy few minutes to come. Let me tell you, we've got the papers at exactly 10:30 sharp. But first, as the authorities struggle to deal with violent riots in the aftermath of the Southport murder of 3 little girls at a dance class, should the Home Secretary consider deploying the army to keep order on the streets? Who better to ask than tonight's newsmaker, former Home Office Minister Anne Widdicombe. Anne, good to see you. Would the deployment of the military be proportionate?
I think not at the moment, at any rate. I, like most politicians, or certainly politicians in a democracy, are very, very chary of getting the army involved in civil matters. Now, they deal with civil emergencies. I mean, you know, they built all the Nightingales during COVID They deal with civil emergencies, but we don't normally expect them to control the population. That is a matter for the police, and I would prefer that it stayed that way.
So do you see the deployment of the military as a policy of last resort?
Oh, absolutely last resort. When it comes to, I mean, not just in any situation, but when it comes to civil commotion, yes, because a lot of this is, you can hardly call it political, it's now degenerated so much, but it would be deemed political in origin, and the army doesn't take sides. So I just think that, I mean, I'm not saying there are never occasions or when it might not be required, but I would be very reluctant to rush into that.
That makes sense. And does Britain have a problem with two-tier policing? You've, of course, occupied a senior role in the Home Office under a Conservative government. Have you seen things change? Do you think that cops pick and choose which protests they prosecute more than others?
Well, I doubt if individual policemen do, but certainly their bosses, the chief constables, yes. I mean, they have an order of priorities. And the fact is that some people have come down on much harder than others. And so, I mean, for example, and I'm sure you'll know this, Martin Daubney was very, very, very briefly arrested when he was out looking at the protest. Now, what had he done? You know, what had he done? Now, to get arrested, you have to actually do something, and that should apply whether you're right, left, religious, irreligious, doesn't matter what it is, that should apply.
Most definitely. I mean, we saw that during the pandemic when Black Lives Matter protests broke all the COVID rules and restrictions. The police waved it by and even took the knee, which I think police shouldn't be doing that. Meanwhile, anti-lockdown protesters bundled into the back of a police van.
Yes, and indeed, if you remember, the Sarah Everard protest was also dealt with extremely severely. Now, I was not against that because there were, after all, laws that were at the time being broken. But that's got to apply across the board. It's got to apply to everybody. And you cannot say, you know, this demonstration is more in need of control than that one.
Indeed. Now, the Prime Minister has divided opinion with his focus on the far right. It's pretty clear that a large number of agitators who are racist thugs have been instrumental in what we've seen this week. You and I, Anne, I've got no doubt, will condemn it, and I hope that those individuals are prosecuted. But what did you make of the tone of his speech and the lack of accommodation of any wider issues being raised by the Prime Minister?
Well, he is not going to look at those wider issues, and they are undeniably that. There can be no doubt at all that, and this is no excuse at all for what's gone on, no excuse at all, but there can be no doubt that immigration is causing a huge amount of concern. Most people are concerned in a very responsible and orderly fashion, but it's there. What Labour are doing, which is they've dropped the Miranda policy, they've dropped all deterrents, they're issuing amnesties, people are still coming in on the boats in large numbers almost every day. And people say, well, where's this going to end? And now we've even got talk of some free movement being reinstated as part of the renegotiations with the EU. So, yeah, people have got a right to be worried, but that is not an excuse for this sort of stuff at all.
If you could have rewritten Sir Keir Starmer's speech, how would you have framed it? Clearly, you would have called out the far-right thugs, I've got no doubt. But what other extra context would you have added, Anne?
Well, I don't even think I'd have kept emphasising the far right, because after all, he never emphasises the far left. But I would just call them thugs, and they are thugs. And they do need dealing with as thugs, regardless of any sort of political label. So I wouldn't have done that, and I would certainly have acknowledged people's concerns. But as I say, that is not an excuse for this. It just isn't. And mustn't be seen to be made as an excuse for this.
Has Sir Keir Starmer painted himself into a political corner here by making many feel that if they're concerned about the illegal immigration problem or legal net migration, that they too are far right?
He hasn't gone quite that far, but that is an implication which some people might draw from what he has said. And we just need to be very careful about our language when we're in this situation. Now, this is not the first riot that Britain's ever faced, but we've got a series of such riots, and they need to be treated as such and not treated in any way, from the left or the right, not treated in any way politically.
Now, Anne, you've been, as I mentioned before, a senior figure in the Home Office under a Conservative government. What do we need to see from the Home Secretary now in the days and weeks ahead?
Well, I mean, I think we could see some very tough action. And I think we could see the police instructed to take very tough action, and the police instructed to do that quite regardless of what the politics of the situation are. But I think we should also be saying to the police, you do actually only arrest when somebody's done something wrong.
Most definitely. And the Prime Minister talked about, with considerable conviction, how he's going to speak up for those who feel targeted because of their race or their religion. He's absolutely right about that, but I don't remember such pronouncements during those weekly pro-Gaza marches in central London and other cities, in which a lot of anti-Jewish rhetoric was shouted with slogans waved around on placards.
And remember also, the police were taking an extremely soft line. And they actually said to one poor chap, you look Jewish, keep away, you look Jewish. Well, nobody should be told to keep off the streets because they have a particular racial origin. So, no, I mean, there are dual standards. There are dual standards on the part of the police and the Prime Minister.
Anne, you're one of my favourite contributors to the show, one of my favourite people, frankly. What a thrill it was to have you in the studio last weekend. It really is such a joy. You're the jewel in the crown of Mark Dolan tonight. I'm going to miss you terribly because I'm off for the rest of August. I've fallen horribly behind with the holiday and the boss is not happy. So, therefore, I'm back in September. So go and have a brilliant August. And I know you'll be on fighting form in September when we are reunited.
I'll see you then.
Have a great summer. My thanks to Anne Widdicombe, former Home Office Minister, and of course now a spokesperson for Reform UK. Like everyone, she's been on a journey. Next up, folks, we got tomorrow's newspaper front pages. Lots to get through. Don't go anywhere.
Hello there. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. It remains unsettled over the next 24 hours, particularly across western parts of Scotland. Drier further southeast and turning increasingly humid as well. A deep area of low pressure sits to the northwest of the UK. Outbreaks of rain pushing in from the Atlantic, but also drawing in some quite warm and humid air. Through the rest of Sunday into the early hours of Monday, rain across parts of Northern Ireland into Scotland, this turning increasingly heavy. Met Office warning in place across western parts of Scotland right through until the end of Monday. Temperatures overnight, despite clear spells even in the south, remaining in mid-teens for many, 14 to 16 Celsius. So a mild, muggy start to Monday. Best of the sunshine across southeastern areas, but heavy rain across western parts of Scotland. You can see the bright colours there. So some tricky travelling conditions first thing, with this slowly pushing northeastwards through the day. Northern Ireland as well, seeing outbreaks of rain push in now and then, and temperatures around 19 or 20 Celsius, so a muggy start to the day. Cloudy across Wales, the West Country, with some drizzle over the hills, but that sunshine from the word go across southeast England. As we go through the day, rain continues to push north and eastwards across Northern Ireland, affecting parts of Scotland where it will be heavy at times. Western parts of northern England, Wales also seeing the risk of some rain, which will turn heavy later on in the day. Best of the dry and bright weather holding on further south and east, where it will be warm and humid, temperatures reaching 25 to 27 Celsius, a little fresher across the far northwest, highs around 19 degrees here. For Tuesday, this weather front eventually starts pushing its way south and eastwards, clearing much of the UK through the morning. Showers, though, pushing in across Northern Ireland, western Scotland, some of these heavy at times, and generally a fresher feel for all. Further showery rain expected through the middle towards the end of the week as well. See you soon.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's bang on 10:30. That very rarely happens, but let's have tomorrow's papers. And I've just nicked Chris Wilde's papers. Yes, we'll start with the Daily Mail, and let's see what they have for us. Tinderbox Britain stoking race riots from his sunbed. I think that's a very interesting headline, that. Former English Defence League leader Tommy Robinson relaxes in five-star Cyprus resort while fuelling violence across the UK with inflammatory online posts. Absolutely disgraceful. Next up, where shall we go, Alistair? Let's got The Guardian now. Which is always a cracking read. You will regret this, Starmer warns rioters. And Tory culture wars stoked far right, says ex-advisor. The Conservative government left the UK wide open to far-right violence erupting across parts of the country by ignoring red flags and stoking fires with a culture war agenda. The senior advisor on extremism to Tory Prime Ministers has said. Dame Sara Khan, who was Rishi Sunak's independent advisor for social cohesion and resilience until May, and acted as counter-extremism commissioner under both May and Johnson, said the recent administrations have failed the British people. OK, now let's go to the Mirror. Far right on rampage, under siege. Thugs attack migrant hotel on another day of shame across the UK. Starmer warns the Obs, you will regret this after sickening scenes. Let's go to the Eye now. Starmer vows to bring thugs to justice as riots sweep the UK. Independent, PM warns far-right thugs, you will regret taking part in those riots. Last but not least, the Metro. Riot mobs wreak havoc across Britain. Shame on you. Well, clearly, there is only one story in town, and that is the civil disobedience, the violence, the disorder that we're seeing in our great cities and towns across the country. Let's get reaction now from tonight's top pundits. We've got Chris Wilde, Joanne Nadler and Paul Richards. So, Chris, yes. How worried are you about Britain facing a summer of political chaos?
Yeah, I'm very worried. I've been in Yorkshire for the last 2 days, in Huddersfield, and I went through to Halifax and Bradford. There seems to be some calm there, and they are quite big in Muslim population there, but it seems that the communities there are holding it together. I'm very worried. I think I'm more worried about, I mean, these people just, they're rebels without a clue. It's like when white middle-class men are raping and killing children, they're not speaking up, they're not using their voices. And even with this situation, yeah, it's absolutely horrific, but right now the pen is more mighty than the sword, and these people in particular should be focusing on building this community, and if they want the power, if they want a voice, then there's a way to do it, but this is not going to get any kind of reaction at all. It scares me because I live in Enfield. It's quite a multicultural place, and I know my neighbours are terrified at the moment. My Muslim neighbours, they're scared to walk the streets. There's a really kind of intense atmosphere at the moment, and it's really precarious for everyone. So I just don't know. And
what is the fix? I mean, you know, obviously, we talked earlier about how actually Keir Starmer is well qualified to tackle the law and order issue as a former top lawyer himself, Director of Public Prosecutions, 24-hour courts, all really good ideas from this new Labour government. But that strikes me as the tip of the iceberg, you know, that just tackling these violent thugs. What's underneath it and how do we fix it?
I think, if anything, you've got to go in hard with this. And I think you can't call it democracy because this isn't, you know, violence is not democracy. Freedom of speech is. But it's people... I don't know if I'm allowed to mention his name, but the leader of the EDL, Mr Robinson, Tommy Robinson, it's like this man, who is funding this man, who, you know, take him off all social media. They have the powers to do that. So why are they not doing that? They're stoking the fire, making it worse, and yet he's sunning it up in Cyprus. It's like, this guy is dangerous, and he's leading these vacuous idiots into our communities. They're destroying it, and it just seems, but, you know, nobody seems to be doing anything. Why are you not crashing down on him, taking his funding off him, locking him up and locking everyone else up? They've got the powers to do that.
That's an interesting question. Are high-profile figures in politics and or the media stoking these tensions and creating this sort of tinderbox?
I think there's a certain amount of dog whistling going on, but I think they'll regret it because it'll unleash forces beyond their control. But, I mean, we talked about the Russians earlier. I think there needs to be an intelligence-led response to this too, and to see the sorts of mythologies that are being put around on the internet need to be looked at and to see what the sources for those are. But you know what the mainstream media is completely missing here is the wonderful response from ordinary citizens coming out with their brooms and their shovels and, you know, clearing up the mess the next day. There were more of them on the streets than there were the rioters. And that Bricky, who did get in the media, who was rebuilding the wall outside the mosque, that is the true face of these communities. And that needs to be told, that story needs to be told far more.
Most definitely. I mean, Joanne, there's a lot of finger-pointing going on right now, which I guess is not very helpful, not very constructive.
Well, I suppose if there's evidence that individuals have been directly responsible for spreading actual lies, then it's important that we know that. But I would just caution making a bogeyman out of one or two specific people if actually what we're looking at here is something more complex. I think you were quite right, Paul, to talk about the presence potentially of actors from, overseas actors, and particularly there does seem to be evidence that there has been Russian bots involved in all of this. It's a kind of a way to kind of create division in another country in a pretty, low-level but dangerous way.
Folks, let me know your thoughts on this. gbnews.com/your say. I'm going to read out some of your comments in a second. But how about this, Paul, from Paul Embry, your namesake? He's also on the left politically, trade unionist, of course. And Paul Embry tweeted the following just a couple of days ago. Britain doesn't have a far-right problem. Britain has a problem with a dominant liberal class that for years ignored legitimate mainstream concerns over economic injustice, crime and immigration, and is now experiencing the blowback. Does he have a point?
No. I mean, there is a far right. It is organised. It's organising in different ways than the ones we've seen in the past. People are sort of blaming this on the EDL. The EDL doesn't exist in any sort of form we would recognise, but there are these networks around conspiracy theories, around anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim voices.
But is it comparable
online.
Is it comparable to the threat of Islamic extremism, and is it comparable to those other more prosaic issues like getting a roof over your head, illegal immigration and other issues?
I think in terms of the security issues, it is comparable in the sense that, our streets are aflame and there are people smashing up police cars. So, I mean, there is obviously a genuine public order issue. But the deeper issues around, community cohesion, jobs, safe communities where people can walk about, these are being addressed by the government over the longer term. And you were sort of saying Starmer doesn't care about the things. I mean, the whole Labour project is about community cohesion.
So you mentioned community cohesion and people getting a job and accommodation. None of that's helped by legal net migration of 700,000 a year, is it? Or illegal immigration. Those two factors work against Labour's plans.
Well, we've argued this out before, haven't we? Immigration in itself is not a bad thing. The economy needs people to come in. We need people to build our houses. We're about to launch a massive
pick our fruit.
Yeah, all the jobs that people don't want to do. There's entry-level jobs often for people arriving here. One of the things that was smashed up in one of those towns we saw was a supermarket opened up, presumably by a second or third generation immigrant. Working hard, probably working all hours, providing.
But you're right about that, Paul. But you are sounding a bit. I think Paul is sounding slightly complacent here about the rate of change, the pace of change, and the sheer numbers involved. And I think it's not so much about immigration per se; it's about assimilation, which has been raised by
the dosage is the poison. Isn't it? So if it's 50 to 100,000 a year,
well, I'm not sure.
That is an expression that you use
not a good one to
medical
use in
terms.
this context, I would say.
I'm not sure that I would use that expression either, because I'm not sure it's completely clear what it means. But I do think that people have been.
A pint of water is good for you. 10 pints will kill you.
Depends how thirsty you are, I suppose. But
but go on.
I mean, I do think when we touched on this in the earlier discussion that there is a danger here that any sensible discussion about big changes that have been happening to communities is going to be hijacked now by a number of thugs and that we won't be able to then return to a more rational conversation about issues that people are clearly very concerned about.
Isn't that the point, Chris? That isn't Keir Starmer? He's absolutely right to focus on these thugs, but it really sort of now storyboarding this as a far right problem in the UK allows the Prime Minister to escape addressing these wider issues that we're talking about. People that are watching and listening to this show that feel that the country is changing beyond recognition very rapidly, something for which they never voted.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, unfortunately, this takes the focus off the housing crisis, what's going on at the moment. It takes the focus off what's going on with, people on food banks, people can't afford to live. It takes a lot of focus off that. But at the same time they've allowed this to happen. This has been building for many years. Sure. The far right have just come in because there's been a little gap, there's been a loophole, and they've been allowed to come in and do this. And I think I feel sorry for Keir Starmer. He's got a huge job on his hand. And how do you deal with this? How does any leader deal with this? And I think at the moment they've got to come together, unite, and look at how we can, build them communities again. It's worrying.
OK, well, let's have a look at some of your messages, which I asked for. gbnews.com/your say. Jane is a GB News member and says, Mark, disgraceful. Tommy Robinson is not stoking anything. He's on holiday. He said no violence. He has hardly said anything. You are finger-pointing. Tommy tells more of the truth than you guys do. Alan, who's a GB News member, says, we want our country back and we need politicians who understand that. Caroline has said Tommy Robinson has stressed that protests should be peaceful on many occasions. His event last week was attended by tens of thousands. It was a day of speeches, gospel songs and celebration of British values. No one mentioned that in the press. How about this? Mark says the way to fix things has been closed for years, unfortunately. The peaceful route has been exhausted and nothing came of it. It needs appeasement, not more division, and both sides who are extremists stoke it, and the politicians are absolutely useless. OK, well, look, this one is going to run and run. Obviously, it is a big, big problem. By the way, but politically, this is a headache for Keir Starmer, isn't it, Paul? His first major crisis of his premiership. He needs to make sure that we don't have a summer of these riots because the optics aren't good.
Yeah, I mean, he's elected not a month ago, and he on a perspectives of house building and sorting out the NHS and putting more police on the streets and jobs and all these things, and now that agenda is being totally subverted by urban rioting. But this is the stuff of politics, and actually, it might be the proving of him too. I mean, it's an issue. Obviously, he's got good credentials on, as we've said. It is something that speaks to his own experiences as the Director of Public Prosecution, so he may come out of this stronger.
Most definitely. Well, look, it is an opportunity for the Prime Minister. If he gets it right, I will be praising him full-heartedly. OK, folks, lots more to come, more front pages. See you in 2.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Prince Harry also revealed that he wouldn't bring his wife Meghan Markle back to the UK over safety concerns.
Let's talk to royal correspondent Michael Cole.
Good morning, Stephen. Good morning, Ellie. I mean, they live in California. I'm not sure what the murder rate is there, but that's a more dangerous place than Britain's at any time of the day. And, of course, he compromised his own safety when he said in his book, Spare, his autobiography, which was Ghost Britain, that he'd personally killed 25 Taliban when he was serving with the British Army in Afghanistan. Well, that painted a target for life on the back of himself and his family, which was a very unwise thing for him to do. The other thing which struck me, it was that he invoked the name of the late Queen, saying that he'd had several conversations with his grandmother, and she'd been very, very supportive in his battle. He sees himself, and it's the word he's used, as a dragon slayer against the popular press, the tabloid press, and he's continuing with that. Of course, his brother, Prince William, has settled, but also in the programme was Hugh Grant. Now, Hugh Grant also has settled, as indeed did I, when I received an apology from News Group. I believe in a free and unfettered press. Newspapers are having a bad time at the moment, losing circulation, losing advertising. Young people don't read newspapers. And so I felt that the right thing to do was to settle. I didn't want to take punitive action against newspapers.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, a couple more front pages. Welcome back. The Times. I think we have Alistair, don't we? Let's have a look. Riot inciters face a reckoning. And new planning rules will lift barriers to onshore wind and solar. Labour will relax planning rules to make it easier and cheaper to build solar farms and onshore wind turbines. Telegraph, far-right clash with Muslims in rioting. And don't order fake Ozempic online, buyers warned. Pharmacy leaders have urged people not to buy potentially fake weight loss jabs online amid a shortage of Ozempic, which is expected to stretch into next year. Royal Navy ships on standby in Middle East over fears of war. OK, those are your front pages. Let's have a look at a couple of these stories, if we can. You were celebrating this story in the Times, Paul Richards. New planning rules will lift barriers to onshore wind and solar. What do you think about the sort of aesthetic impact of this technology?
I think a wind farm onshore is a beautiful, balletic, wonderful thing. I think they are wonderful.
And what about the fact that the actual the blades only have a certain shelf life and then they're virtually impossible to dispose of?
Well, we need to make them in this country and not import them from Norway.
Yeah, but you've still got a disposal problem. There's still a huge environmental cost to having to dispose of them.
I'm sure we'll find something clever to do with them, but they are beautiful. I love them.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one. I mean, are we willing to sacrifice the countryside for energy security, Joanne?
I don't think... I mean, according to this, it's clearly not going to be a question of people being willing. It's going to effectively be forced on them. I mean, actually, funnily enough, I don't completely disagree with Paul. I don't think there's anything intrinsically ugly about these windmills. I'm more concerned about the damage that they do to bird life, to nature, and the fact that, quite frankly, this is investing in a technology that's really very unpredictable, and we're all going to end up with much higher energy bills.
It's a windmill. It generates power.
They're not supposed to lower the energy.
Yes, but it only generates power when there's wind, Paul.
What do you think, folks? gbnews.com/your say. Are you willing to lose a bit of the countryside in order to achieve cheaper energy and energy security? Is it a price worth paying? My concern about this, Chris, is that I think it's an experiment. I'm all for green renewables, but I've not seen a country that has had sustained energy sources from wind and solar.
Yeah, and I haven't seen my bills get lowered yet. They just keep rising and rising. Where's all this energy? Where's all this organic energy coming from? It's not impacting.
It is a gamble, isn't it? Renewables are a punt, aren't they, Paul?
Well, let's see. I mean, let's try it, because I think the alternative of just relying on for Putin's gas and oil and, you know...
But we are going to be buying...
But we've had our own gas and oil, and Labour have immediately closed down the new licences.
Or nuclear power.
Well, isn't that the point? Isn't the point about oil and gas that it's not an experiment, it's not a gamble? We know that they provide...
Well, we also know, without opening the can of worms, we also know it's destroying the planet, don't we?
Is there a tension between Ed Miliband and Sir Keir Starmer on...
There are no tensions at the top of the government, you should know that.
Well, we know about Angela versus Rachel, don't we? I mean, that's the ultimate showdown.
With one voice.
OK, well, I'll take your word for that. Let's have a look at some of your messages. Alan just says, look, we need Nigel Farage to sort things out. Labour haven't got a clue. Starmer is just stoking the situation with his threats, says Deirdre. That doesn't help. He could calm the situation down if he said he would listen to the issues. There you go. By the way, can I nick your Guardian? Because
yes,
producer James has found a story in there.
There you go, so it's in there
and it's about the culture wars, OK? And it's quite an interesting story here. And it's Tory culture wars stoked the far right, says a former advisor to Rishi Sunak. Does she have a point, Joanne?
Well, we've only got the front pages, so I will comment on this, but it has to be taken with the caveat that we've not seen the rest of the story. Now, what's interesting about the way this has been covered on the front page is that it doesn't go on to explain that Dame Sarah Khan, of course, wrote the very significant report that came out under Rishi Sunak's government about issues to do with assimilation and Islamism. So I don't think these comments here can be taken solely out of the context, the wider context of seeing extremism across the board. And if you just read the front page here, it rather suggests that she's only talking about the way in which one can infer from this she feels that certain elements of the Conservative Party allowed, or rather were slow to look at any danger from the so-called far right. My understanding also as well is that in terms of how the authorities wanted to discuss the far right in terms of any threat they posed, it was rather more to refer to the extreme right, which was a way of kind of pulling away from this idea that the far right could be seen as being a set of ideas which aren't shared by the majority of people, but just are a set of ideas, whereas the extreme right was something that relates to, fomenting violence, potentially.
Do you have any recollection of Sir Keir Starmer being as robust in his language about Islamic extremism as he has been this week about the far right?
Well, no, and I think that's one of the problems. As I said earlier, that not only has he not been as robust in his language, but there does seem to be an element of the Labour Party which has found it very difficult to stand up to some of the sectarian elements of the Islamist politics that we've seen play out in some of these towns.
Yeah, because, Paul, I mean, the Prime Minister has personal experience of this. The Prime Minister is the politician who had to go to the Speaker of the House of Commons before the election and beg the Speaker to not pursue an amendment vote on a ceasefire in Gaza because he feared that if his Labour backbenchers supported the Labour Party's position, which was to support the government's position, that they would be attacked in the street.
Wow.
So,
well, hang on. These riots after 14 years of Conservative government is another example of the mess that's been left behind, which the Labour Party is now having to sort out. And on the streets, they are chanting, "Stop the boats."
Why shouldn't they start chanting "Stop the boats"?
I'm merely pointing out that is a mainstream Conservative slogan which they have adopted. So
well, I don't think "Stop the boats" is the same as "Kill the Jews," is it?
If you start, if you open this, the bottle, the genie comes out, and this is what a lot of this rioting is about.
What is wrong with the chant "Stop the boats"?
Well, because it's basically a racist chant, isn't it, by racists on the street?
Is it?
It's contextual, isn't it? Because
on its own, is it racist?
Well, that's sort of a metaphysical sort of dilemma, isn't it?
What do you think, Joanne? Because in a way, this is at the heart of the problem with the Prime Minister's rhetoric, I think.
I think that talking about, the phrase "stop the boats" as a political phrase, if one can extrapolate it from the violence that's going on at the moment, is something of a crude phrase. However, it crude simply because it was boiling down a number of very complex problems.
I wouldn't put it on a T-shirt.
But clearly there was a policy to try and stop illegal immigration into this country. We're not talking about legal immigration, about which we need to also have a discussion, as we've intimated earlier and discussed earlier. But illegal immigration, which involves people being put into very dangerous circumstances, many of whom are now dying in the water and being exploited in this way, I think it's perfectly reasonable to want to stop that, surely.
Fair enough. Well, listen, folks, it's been a hard old week, hasn't it? But I really loved my pundits tonight. Very balanced debate. We don't all agree. That's the point of the show. I'm off for August. I'm going to miss you hugely. It's the best job I've ever had. my viewers, my listeners, I just, there's no show without you. I do this for you. I put a lot into the show because I love this job and I love broadcasting to you. And I'm back in September. Enjoy Ben Leo while I'm gone. Thank you to the team for working so hard. Keep it GB News. And yeah, hopefully I'll have suntan in a couple of weeks' time. Have a good August. See you in September.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. It remains unsettled over the next 24 hours, particularly across western parts of Scotland. Drier further southeast and turning increasingly humid as well. A deep area of low pressure sits to the northwest of the UK. Outbreaks of rain pushing in from the Atlantic, but also drawing in some quite warm and humid air. Through the rest of Sunday into the early hours of Monday, rain across parts of Northern Ireland into Scotland, this turning increasingly heavy. Met Office warning in place across western parts of Scotland right through until the end of Monday. Temperatures overnight, despite clear spells even in the south, remaining in mid-teens for many, 14 to 16 Celsius. So a mild, muggy start to Monday. Best of the sunshine across southeastern areas, but heavy rain across western parts of Scotland. You can see the bright colours there. So some tricky travelling conditions first thing, with this slowly pushing northeastwards through the day. Northern Ireland as well, seeing outbreaks of rain push in now and then, and temperatures around 19 or 20 Celsius, so a muggy start to the day. Cloudy across Wales, the West Country, with some drizzle over the hills, but that sunshine from the word go across southeast England. As we go through the day, rain continues to push north and eastwards across Northern Ireland, affecting parts of Scotland. It'll be here where it'll be heavy at times. Western parts of northern England, Wales also seeing the risk of some rain, which will turn heavy later on in the day. Best of the dry and bright weather holding on further south and east, where it will be warm and humid. Temperatures reaching 25 to 27 Celsius, a little fresher across the far northwest, highs around 19 degrees here. For Tuesday, this weather front eventually starts pushing its way south and eastwards, clearing much of the UK through the morning. Showers, though, pushing in across Northern Ireland, western Scotland, some of these heavy at times, and generally a fresher feel for all. Further showery rain expected through the middle towards the end of the week as well. See you soon.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We could be calling you with the news that you've won our latest Great British giveaway. An incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. David from Kent was our last big winner. Listen to what he had to say about getting that winning call.
Hi, I'm David from Kent and I won £15,000 and it couldn't have come at a better time. I was gobsmacked. What have you got to lose for what it costs? In fact, I've done it again this week, so I'd recommend it to anybody.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Britain's Newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
We're joined now by GB News national reporter Charlie Peters, who is outside Buckingham Palace for us.
Well, let's start with the expenditure, shall we? From the last year, it was £89.1 million. That's what the royal household spent. And one of the core parts of that expenditure was, of course, their big event last May, the coronation. £800,000 went into that. And then we should look at the engagements. You mentioned the number that King Charles made last year. Well, £4.2 million on those engagements, much of that travel. And then finally, how much that costs us all? Well, it's £1.29 per person. That's the cost of the monarchy to the taxpayer. But that really hides the truth of how that cash comes about, because all of the money that the royal household spends is actually theirs being given back to them by the Treasury. It comes from the Crown Estate surplus. That's a £16 billion portfolio they have, and their sovereign grant is made up of the surplus from 2 years prior. So in the year to 2022, there was about £350 million knocking around from the surplus. That was given all to the Treasury, and they were given back 15% as their core sovereign grant. Additional 10% was given towards the resurfacing of Buckingham Palace. That's been going on since Parliament voted on it in 2017. It's expected to take 10 years. But all in all, that's been about £86.3 million. And as you heard, the expenditure was £89 million. So how do they mix that gap? How do they close that gap in and cost out? Well, they make their own money as well from additional sources of income. And that was the gates, the receipts to Windsor Castle and their many palaces across the country, where people have paid about £10 million to visit in the last year.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good evening. The top stories from the GB newsroom. A police officer has been injured outside a hotel in Tamworth as officers continue to deal with violent acts of thuggery. That coming from Staffordshire Police this evening. Merseyside Police says 6 people have been charged after disorder in Southport, Liverpool city centre and Walton in the past week. The Prime Minister earlier vowed rioters would regret taking part in